Stop looking only at the year on your quarters. That could be the biggest mistake. In this video, we're checking 4 Washington quarters where the real secret may be hiding in the mint mark, edge, strike, weight, or condition. And one overlooked detail could turn an ordinary coin into a serious collector discovery.
The year 1998 sits at an interesting turning point in American quarter history. Pick up a 1998 D Washington quarter, and, at first glance, nothing seems unusual. George Washington appears on the front, the familiar eagle dominates the reverse, and a small D identifies the Denver Mint. But this coin represents the end of an era. In 1998, the United States was preparing for a major transformation of the quarter. The following year, the 50-state quarters program would begin, replacing the long familiar eagle reverse with a constantly changing series of state designs. That makes the 1998 quarter the final regular issue of this classic Washington quarter design before one of the biggest changes in modern American coinage. And that historical position gives us a much better starting point than simply asking whether the date is old, because it isn't particularly rare by mintage. The Denver Mint struck approximately 821 million 1998 D quarters. That is an enormous number. So if you find one in an old roll, collection, or group of circulated coins, the D Mint mark alone does not make it valuable. The real investigation begins when you ask a different question. What separates an ordinary survivor from an extraordinary one? Look first at Washington's portrait. Not the date. Not even the mint mark. Look at the large exposed areas of the coin. Washington's cheek is one of the first places where contact marks become obvious. The field around the portrait can also reveal scratches, hits, dullness, or other evidence that the quarter spent years moving through circulation. Now slowly rotate the coin beneath a strong light. A circulated example may appear flat or worn, but an exceptional mint state coin can show strong cartwheel luster moving across the surfaces. That visual effect matters because condition is where this common date quarter starts becoming much harder to find. Now check the small d. It identifies Denver production. The mint mark itself is not automatically a premium feature, but its location deserves inspection whenever you are studying the strike. Look around the nearby lettering, the date, and Washington's portrait for anything that appears unusual. But here is where collectors have to remain disciplined. A strange mark is not automatically a mint error. A scratch can imitate doubling. A hit can distort a letter, or it can remove part of a design. And random damage can sometimes appear much more dramatic than a genuine mint-made characteristic. The best evidence is something that makes sense within the production process. Now turn the quarter over. This is the reverse that disappeared from regular circulating quarters after 1998. The eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows, with olive branches beneath. Quarter dollar appears along the bottom. United States of America and E pluribus unum complete the design. Instead of scanning the entire reverse at once, focus first on the eagle's breast and wing feathers. These details can show where quickly. Then look at the open fields. Marks in large open spaces often become more distracting as the grade rises. This is one reason 2 1998 D quarters can look almost identical to a casual observer but receive very different collector attention. Now bring in the physical specifications. A normal 1998 D Washington quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams and measure about 24.3 millimeters in diameter. It has a reeded edge and a copper nickel-clad construction over a pure copper center. That layered composition explains why many circulated examples show a visible copper-colored band around the edge. Weight becomes useful when a coin appears physically abnormal. If the scale reading is dramatically different from the expected specification, that can become one clue worth investigating. But weight by itself is never enough. A major difference needs supporting evidence. Does the planchet look unusual? Is the diameter normal? Does the edge look consistent? Does the strike suggest that something went wrong during production? That is where an ordinary quarter can move into genuine error coin territory. A legitimate off-center strike, wrong planchet error, clipped planchet, or other major production mistake would have to show characteristics consistent with the mint's manufacturing process. And authentication becomes much more important when the claim becomes dramatic. Now let's talk about condition rarity. With hundreds of millions produced, ordinary 1998 D quarters are easy to understand. The challenge arrives at the extreme upper end of the grading scale. PCGS records a heritage auction sale from February 2015 in which a 1998 D Washington quarter graded MS 67 Plus sold for $1,527.50. That is a verified auction result, and it illustrates something important. The buyer was not paying more than $1,500 simply because the coin said 1998. They were paying for an exceptionally preserved example at a very high certified grade. Now compare that real result with the supplied figure connected to this coin. $102,000 plus. That number should immediately trigger investigation, not assumption. A normal 1998 D quarter does not suddenly become a six-figure coin because of its year or Denver Mint mark. For a valuation approaching $102,000 to make sense, the individual specimen would need something extraordinary behind it. Perhaps an extremely significant authenticated mint error, an unusual planchet combination, a previously recognized major variety, exceptional provenance, or another characteristic important enough to place that individual coin far outside the normal market for a regular 1998 D quarter. The evidence has to justify the number. That distinction is essential, because coin collecting becomes much more interesting when you stop asking, how much is a 1998 D quarter worth? And instead ask, what exactly is different about this specific 1998 D quarter? Study the strike. Check Washington's cheek. Inspect the fields. Look at the D mint mark. Turn the coin over and examine the eagle. Check the edge. Confirm the weight. Then compare anything unusual with a normal example. The vast majority will tell an ordinary story, but exceptional grade or a genuine mint-made anomaly can completely change the conversation. And that is what makes this first coin such a perfect beginning to our four-quarter investigation. It comes from the final year of the classic Eagle reverse era. Hundreds of millions were made. Most are ordinary. But the right individual coin can prove that sometimes the most interesting discovery is hiding inside a date almost everyone assumes they already understand.
More than 350 million of these quarters were struck, but finding the right 1974 D can become much harder than that number suggests. The small D beneath Washington's portrait tells us this quarter came from the Denver Mint. And unlike our first coin, the 1998 D, this one takes us much deeper into the classic clad quarter era. No state quarters. No special circulating reverse designs. Just the familiar Washington portrait on the front and the American eagle on the back. To most people, it looks exactly like the kind of quarter that spent decades moving through vending machines, cash registers, pockets, and coin jars. And that is precisely what happened to enormous numbers of them. Denver struck approximately 353 million 1974 D quarters. So the date and mint mark by themselves are not rare. But here's where the collector story starts changing. A coin can be common in ordinary condition and surprisingly difficult in extraordinary condition. Instead of starting with the date, look directly at Washington's face. Focus on the cheek, then the jaw, then the open field in front of the portrait. These areas act almost like a record of everything that happened to the coin after it was struck. Bay marks, contact marks, circulation wear, small scratches, loss of luster. One quarter may have survived with dozens of distracting marks. Another from the same mint and same year may have much cleaner surfaces. At low grades, that difference may not seem dramatic. At the highest mint state levels, it can become extremely important. Now rotate the quarter slowly under light. A well-preserved, uncirculated coin can show strong mint luster moving across the surface. That effect is very different from artificial shine or ordinary wear. Collectors examining high-grade Washington quarters want clean fields, strong detail, good strike quality, and surfaces that escape the punishment most circulating coins received. And the 1974 D becomes much tougher once you reach those elite grades. That is an important clue, because rarity does not always begin at the mint. Sometimes it develops afterward. Hundreds of millions can be produced, but decades of circulation can dramatically reduce the number surviving at exceptional quality. Now we'll look beneath Washington. There's the D. Denver. The mint mark itself is normal, so seeing that letter does not create a premium automatically. But inspect the surrounding area. Look at the date. Study the lettering. Check the strike. If something appears doubled or distorted, compare it carefully with a normal example before calling a variety. This is one of the easiest places for excitement to outrun evidence. Mechanical doubling can create a flattened, shelf-like appearance. Circulation damage can push metal around. A hit near a letter can make part of the design look duplicated. True mint-made characteristics need to fit the way the coin was actually produced. And now, there's another clue that many casual collectors ignore completely. The edge. Turn the quarter sideways. A normal 1974D should have a reeded edge. You will usually see the copper-colored center exposed between the outer layers because this is not a traditional silver Washington quarter. By 1974, circulating quarters were made from copper-nickel-clad material bonded over a pure copper core. That construction is important. The quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams and measure about 24.3 millimeters across. Those specifications give you something objective to compare. Imagine finding a 1974D that looks noticeably different from every normal example beside it. Maybe the weight is dramatically wrong. Maybe the planchet appears too small. Maybe the strike is strongly off-center. Maybe part of the design is missing in a way consistent with a clipped planchet. Now you're no longer discussing ordinary condition. You are investigating the manufacturing process. During production, a prepared blank had to be fed into the coining chamber, positioned properly, restrained by the collar, and struck by the dies. A problem at any of those stages could create a genuine mint error. If the blank enters incorrectly, the strike can be off-center. If the planchet was improperly punched, a genuine clip may appear. If collar restraint fails, the finished coin can show abnormal expansion. And if a quarter somehow lands on an incorrect planchet, weight and size can become critical clues. But one strange feature alone is not enough. The evidence needs to work together. Appearance, weight, dimensions, strike characteristics, and ultimately authentication when the claim becomes serious. Now flip the quarter over. The eagle reverse gives us another place to judge quality. Look at the eagle's breast, then move outward across the wings. Examine the arrows. Look at the olive branches beneath. And finally study the large open areas surrounding the design. A coin can have almost full detail, but still show enough contact marks to prevent it from reaching an exceptional grade. That is why extreme grade coins are difficult. They do not simply need to be uncirculated. They need to survive unusually well. PCGS describes the 1974D as easy enough to obtain through approximately MS66. But at MS67 and above, the search becomes much more challenging. That tells us something important about the number attached to this coin. $212,000 plus. That figure is enormous. But the responsible way to approach it is not. My quarter says 1974D. Therefore, it must be worth $212,000. The correct question is, what could possibly make one individual 1974D different enough to justify extraordinary money? For an amount anywhere near that level, ordinary date and mint identification would not be enough. You would need something exceptional. Perhaps a dramatic, authenticated wrong planchet error, a major minting abnormality, an extremely important documented variety, an extraordinary combination of rarity and preservation, or some other numismatically significant characteristic that separates the individual coin from hundreds of millions of normal pieces. Without that evidence, the $212,000 plus figure should remain a claim to investigate, not a value to assume. That distinction can save collectors from one of the biggest mistakes in modern coin hunting: searching for a price instead of searching for the reason behind the price. So with the 1974D, build the story from evidence. Look at Washington's surfaces. Check the D mint mark. Study the date and lettering. Turn the coin over. Inspect the eagle and open fields. Check the reeded edge. Confirm the approximately 5.67 gram weight. And when something appears genuinely abnormal, compare it with a normal coin before deciding what happened. Because 353 million coins can make a date common, but they cannot guarantee that every surviving example is equal. And that is exactly what makes the 1974D worth examining before we reach the third coin in this four-quarter hunt. Almost 596 million were struck, but at the highest grades, this 1997P quarter becomes a completely different collector challenge. The 1997P Washington quarter is exactly the kind of coin most people would never stop to examine. It isn't particularly old. It doesn't carry a famous low mintage date. And the small p mint mark simply tells us it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. But this third coin in our four-quarter hunt has a story that becomes much more interesting when we stop asking how many were made and start asking how many survived in truly exceptional condition. Philadelphia produced approximately 595,740,000 quarters in 1997. That number immediately tells us something important. A normal 1997P is not rare because of its mintage. Millions entered circulation, and enormous numbers still exist. But now take one of those quarters and examine it under strong light. Start with Washington's cheek. This large exposed area can reveal contact marks almost immediately. Then move into the open field in front of his face. Look for tiny hits, scratches, loss of luster, evidence that the coin rubbed against other pieces before or after entering circulation. This is where the 1997P starts separating into two very different stories. One story belongs to the ordinary quarter. The other belongs to the exceptional survivor. PCGS describes examples in MS65 and lower as abundant. But by MS66, the coin becomes scarcer, and in MS67, it becomes very scarce. That is an important distinction. The mint produced hundreds of millions. Yet the number surviving with extremely clean surfaces and strong, original quality drops dramatically as the grade climbs. Now look beneath Washington's portrait. There's the P mint mark. Philadelphia. Since the mint mark is completely normal for this issue, the letter itself is not the valuable secret. Instead, study the area around it. Check the date. Look at the lower part of Washington's portrait. Then inspect I in God we trust and liberty. If you see something that appears doubled, don't decide what it is from one quick glance. Real die varieties need consistent characteristics. Random hits, mechanical doubling, worn lettering, or damaged metal can imitate something much more exciting. That's why comparison becomes one of the strongest tools you can use. Place another normal 1997P beside your coin. If the unusual feature disappears once you understand what a normal example looks like, you may have solved the mystery immediately. But if something still looks structurally different, that's when the investigation becomes more serious. Now turn the quarter sideways. A normal 1997P weighs approximately 5.67 grams. Its diameter is about 24.3 millimeters. The edge is reeded. And like other modern-clad Washington quarters of this era, it was made with copper-nickel outer layers bonded over a pure copper center. That layered construction is why you can often see a copper color band along the edge. These specifications matter because an unusual coin should be tested against something normal. Suppose the quarter looks dramatically thinner, or unusually small, or significantly heavier or lighter than expected. One measurement cannot prove a mint error. But if abnormal weight appears together with an unusual strike, different dimensions, or strange planchet characteristics, now several clues may be telling the same story. That is how a real investigation develops. Not from one exciting-looking mark, from multiple pieces of evidence. Now flip the coin over. The 1997P still carries the classic eagle reverse used before the state quarters program changed circulating quarter designs beginning in 1999. The eagle spreads its wings across the center. Héros sit pénile. Olive branches curve below the design, and quarter dollar appears along the bottom. Instead of immediately studying the eagle itself, look at the open fields around it. High-grade coins are unforgiving. A small contact mark that barely matters on a circulated quarter can become much more important when collectors are comparing elite mint state examples. Then move into the eagle's breast. Study the feather detail. Check the wings. Look at the arrows and olive branches. You're trying to understand two different things. How strongly was the coin struck? And how well did it survive afterward? Those questions are not the same. A coin can have no circulation or yet still carry numerous contact marks from handling at the mint. Another coin may have cleaner surfaces, sharper visual appeal, and stronger luster. At the highest grades, those differences become the entire story. And now we reach the real-world auction evidence. PCGS lists a 1997 P Washington quarter graded MS 67+ that sold through Heritage Auctions for $3,525 in September 2016. $3,525 for a quarter from a mintage approaching 596 million pieces. That sale gives us a powerful lesson. Common by date does not always mean common at every level of quality. But now compare that verified result with a much larger supplied figure connected to this coin. $89,000 plus. That amount should not be interpreted as the normal value of a 1997 P quarter. The date does not justify it. The P mint mark does not justify it. And an ordinary high-grade example does not automatically justify it either. For one specific 1997 P to enter a value conversation anywhere near $89,000, there would need to be something extraordinary about that individual coin. A major authenticated mint error, an extremely unusual wrong planchet strike, a dramatic multiple strike, an important documented variety, exceptional provenance, or another numismatically significant feature powerful enough to separate that specimen from hundreds of millions of regular examples. That is where the difference between possibility and evidence becomes critical. A large number may make someone examine a coin, but only the coin itself can justify the valuation. So if you have a 1997 P, change the way you inspect it. Don't begin by asking how much the date is worth. Begin with the surfaces. Look at Washington's cheek. Study the fields. Check the P mint mark and date. Rotate the coin beneath light. Turn it over and inspect the eagle. Check the edge. Confirm the weight. And if something appears genuinely unusual, compare several characteristics instead of relying on one. Because the 1997 P proves that sometimes the most interesting modern quarters are not the ones with tiny mintages. They're the coins that somehow survived far better than millions of others struck beside them. And with one final quarter still ahead, the last coin in this hunt may challenge that idea in an entirely different way. More than 775 million were made, but at the highest grades, this 1985 P quarter suddenly becomes much harder to find. This is the fourth and final coin in our quarter hunt, and this time I want you to forget about age for a moment. 1985 isn't an ancient date. The P mint mark isn't mysterious. And Philadelphia certainly didn't make these quarters in small numbers. In fact, an enormous 775,818,962 pieces were struck. So why are we ending the video with this coin? Because the 1985 P teaches one of the strangest lessons in modern coin collecting. A coin can begin with hundreds of millions of examples and still become surprisingly difficult when you demand near-perfect quality. Start by holding the quarter beneath a bright light. But instead of immediately hunting for an error, watch how the light moves across the surface. On an ordinary circulated quarter, the luster may be broken. Washington's cheek may show contact marks. The open field around the portrait can carry scratches, hits, and signs of years in circulation. That's expected. These coins were built to be used. But now imagine finding one that somehow escaped most of that punishment. Sharp detail, strong original luster, clean fields, very few distracting marks. And suddenly the story changes. Look at the small P mint mark. That tells us the quarter was struck in Philadelphia. There is nothing inherently rare about the P itself. The real test is the quality surrounding it. Move your attention toward the date, then Washington's hair, then his cheek. At lower grades, one more small mark may not seem important. At elite mint state levels, every mark matters. That is where the 1985 P develops an unexpected reputation. PCGS notes that while the coin is extremely common overall, examples in MS-66 and especially MS-67 become considerably scarcer. Their Coinfax commentary describes MS-67 as one of the tougher grades for this issue within the series. That is a completely different kind of rarity. Not mintage rarity. Condition rarity. Now turn the quarter sideways. The edge should be reeded. Because this is a clad Washington quarter, you may also notice the copper-colored center between the outer layers. A standard 1985 P should weigh approximately 5.67 grams and measure about 24.3 millimeters across. Its outer layers are copper-nickel bonded over a pure copper center. Those specifications create a baseline, and baselines become important when something looks genuinely wrong. Suppose your quarter gives a dramatically abnormal weight, or the strike is positioned far away from where it should be. Now you have more than an interesting-looking quarter. You have a production question. During minting, the planchet had to feed correctly into the press, sit properly between the dies, remain controlled by the collar, and receive the strike. If that sequence failed, genuine mint errors could result. A coin might receive more than one strike. It could be struck off-center. A planchet could have a legitimate clip, or a more unusual striking problem could leave obvious evidence. And we know dramatic 1985 P errors really do exist. Public auction records include certified examples involving off-center strikes, clips, double strikes, and even multiple struck pieces. But here's the important twist. A dramatic-looking error does not automatically mean six figures. For example, Heritage sold a certified 1985 P quarter struck about 15% off-center with a small clip for $149 in March 2025. Another certified example with a dramatic second strike, about 95% off-center, sold for $84 in the same auction series. That may surprise people, because visually dramatic does not always equal extremely expensive. Collector demand. Rarity of the specific error. Grade. I appeal. And how many comparable examples exist all affect the final result. Now flip your quarter over. The classic eagle spreads its wings across the reverse. Instead of checking everything at once, concentrate on one area, the open field around the eagle. Clean open fields are difficult to preserve because even small contact marks become obvious. Then examine the breast feathers. Move across the wings. Check the arrows. Look at the olive branches. A strong strike, combined with unusually clean surfaces, is what begins separating a common quarter from an exceptional condition rarity. And we have a real sale that proves the point. PCGS lists an auction record of approximately $1,528 for a 1985 P Washington quarter graded MS-67, sold by Goldberg Auctioneers in June 2017. More than $1,500 for a quarter with a mintage approaching $776 million. That is the collector paradox hiding inside this coin. Common date. Common mint. Extraordinary condition. Now we finally reach the supplied figure attached to this example. $115,000 plus. Could you pull an ordinary 1985 P quarter from circulation and reasonably assume it is worth $115,000? Absolutely not. The verified market evidence for regular examples does not support that conclusion. For one individual 1985 P quarter to enter a six-figure conversation, there would need to be something truly extraordinary behind that specific specimen. Not merely a P mint mark, not merely an unusual scratch, not merely a high grade. You would be looking for an exceptionally important authenticated mint error, an extraordinary and documented rarity, unusual production circumstances, major provenance, or some other numismatic feature capable of separating that coin from hundreds of millions of ordinary pieces. That is why the biggest lesson from all four quarters in this video is not to chase the price first. Chase the evidence. Our 1998 D showed us how a common modern quarter can become interesting near the top of the grading scale. The 1974 D reminded us that enormous production numbers do not make every surviving coin equal. And now the 1985 P takes that lesson even further. Nearly 776 million were struck. Yet elite survivors become much more difficult. So when you check your own quarters, pay attention to what makes the individual coin different. The strike, the surfaces, the weight, the edge, the mint mark, the condition, and any genuine production characteristic that survives close inspection. Because the quarter most people ignore may not be rare because of its date at all. It may be rare because of exactly how it was made or exactly how remarkably it survived. If you enjoy uncovering the clues hiding inside everyday American coins, subscribe to Coin Clues and keep checking your change. Sometimes the most important clue is sitting on a coin everyone else already decided was ordinary.